Mike Tomlin did it again. And yet, some of you seem surprised. I don't get that. I don't get why some of you are surprised. I said it would happen. Many of my colleagues in media said it would happen. A lot of the fans said it would happen. And really, everyone should have known it was going to happen. The Pittsburgh Steelers lose to the Cleveland Browns. The lowly Cleveland Browns. Yes, they stopped Myles Garrett from breaking the sack record, but they lose to the lowly Cleveland Browns when they had a chance to lock up the division title. And say what you want about a weak division, and I could do a whole show and rant on whether or not the NFL should even award a home playoff game and a higher seed to a division champion, and whether or not it should just be going off record and just rank them how they are, and division title maybe just gets you in the playoffs and nothing else. But they had the division title and the 4 seed right in front of them, and they let it slip away, and now they have Sunday Night Football against the Baltimore Ravens, a rivalry game, a winner-take-all rivalry game. Winner wins the division. The loser goes home. It is prime time. It will close off the 2025 season. The NFL gets what it wants, even though they didn't rig the game, of course. But Mike Tomlin did it again. We are going to touch on Mike Tomlin doing it again. We also are going to discuss the false narrative, the false lazy narrative that exists now and is rearing its ugly head in the aftermath of the Steelers' horrible loss to the Cleveland Browns. And then, maybe what I expect from Steelers Ravens and why maybe that doesn't make sense, the conventional wisdom off of what we just saw on Sunday afternoon. Mike Asti here. Mic Drop, made possible by Believe, available everywhere you get your podcasts and on SiriusXM. I am streaming this live before it pops over to Believe and the podcast platforms and in your ears here. Maybe one of these last ones I'll do here as we close off 2025 in the final days before New Year. Like and subscribe my personal YouTube channel that I'm going to try to do a lot more with here in the coming year. So there, like and subscribe. And you can also feel free to chat along here as I'm streaming this live. Maybe I will answer your question. Maybe I will talk to you. If not, I will rant for the purpose of this show. And of course, expect a lot more guests and a lot more shows coming up in the new year. Many shows with guests, including a recent one with friend and colleague Baseball Hall of Fame voter Will Graves, defending his ballot, giving my takes on why I liked and why I disliked Will and his colleagues' ballots and his fellow voters' ballots. All available right now on the Believe main page. Searching Mic Drop for shows on Believe, and then, of course, Mic Drop everywhere you get your podcasts, and find me on social as well. But as I said in the lead-in, Mike Tomlin did it again. Oops, he did it again. And it's not a catchy tune. It's not going to make you bob your head. It's not going to make you happy if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. But nonetheless, Mike Tomlin did it again. 13-6, a loss in Cleveland, even though you could hear Steeler fans there, and the Steeler fans were louder than Browns fans who checked out on the season, and many of them didn't even want to win the game, despite hurting the Steelers. They didn't even want to win the game. They won a better draft pick. But you could hear Muth a lot in Cleveland. Kind of embarrassing for Cleveland fans, but nonetheless, Cleveland won the game. Cleveland did what they had to do. Cleveland didn't look that great. Shedeur Sanders still showed you reasons why he's maybe not a future franchise guy, and Cleveland should still look elsewhere. Rookie year, rookie growing pains, but still, he almost lost the game for the Browns. Their offense didn't look much better after maybe an early burst. And then defensively, yeah, they looked good, but, kind of so did the Steelers. Who is that about? Is that more about the team's defenses? And yeah, Cleveland's defense looked great, but the Steelers' offense looked anemic because Garrett had the win rate, but he didn't have the sacks, which is, of course, what he wants for the counting numbers and for the sack record. But they won, and this is a really, really, really bad stat, which will help top this off even more. Again, before I fully dive into Tomlin and where the Steelers stand right now and how bad that loss was, because you could certainly argue for the gravity of it, for how freaking bad Cleveland is, even without DK Metcalf, which we'll get into, and certainly that was a factor, not having him. Maybe the worst of the Tomlin tenure, of the Tomlin era. Yeah, you can go to some bad playoff losses. Yeah, you can go to losing to the Jaguars when you were favorite at home in a playoff game, my first playoff game that I covered in the box. But maybe regular season wise, you go to this one, because this is an insane stat here. The Steelers are now winless, 0-4-1 in their last 5 games against teams with a record of 8+ games below 500. So to make that clear, the Steelers are now 0-4-1 in their last 5 games against teams that at the time of the game were 8 or more games below 500. So a significant losing record, teams well out of the playoff race, really bad teams. A lot of those at the end of the season as well. Of course, you'd have to be to already have that many games below 500. But that started 2020, losing to the 2-10-1 Bengals. The next year, the 0-8 Lions. 2023, the 2-10 Cards. The 2023 Patriots as well, who were 2-10. And of course, 2 years later, after firing arguably the GOAT of coaches and then a 1-year situation, they now have Vrabel, and they are clicking. They are a division champ, so it can happen. You can quickly turn it around. It can be done when you change coaches. And then, of course, this year, Sunday, the 2025 edition, the 3-12 Cleveland Browns going into the game. And that's part of what I was saying, that Tomlin did it again. As much as Tomlin has built a career of sometimes overachieving, allowing a team led by Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges when Mason was at his worst and Duck really never did anything outside of maybe win some games off of moxie and people wearing duck heads around in 2019 when Ben got hurt. I was on the beat then. They were 1 game away from making the postseason. And in this current format, that would be a playoff year. Likely not winning a playoff game, of course. So I'm not going to say that would have ruined the apple cart of this current drought, but they would have been in. That was the last time only 6 teams got in per conference. Now 7 do. They would have got in. They would have been the 7th seed that year. You could even argue last year. You could even argue a few years back that even getting in the playoffs with those rosters, with the quarterbacks that he's had, and yes, bringing in Kenny Pickett was something that he wanted to do. He was sold on bringing in Kenny Pickett. Bringing in Russell Wilson was something that he wanted to do. And of course, now he wanted to bring in Aaron Rodgers. Those moves don't happen without him wanting to do them, writing off on them, if not driving the bus on them. Kenny Pickett, Tomlin was fully in on. I know it to be true. You cannot say it wasn't on him, and he's not a victim of circumstance by any means. He has just as much clout with the Steelers as any Hall of Fame coach would have with any franchise, really, if not more, because he's been around for so long. And we'll get into the Hall of Fame thing as one of the false narratives in a bit here. But he's overachieved for sure. There are years that he's overachieved, and as annoying as it is for fans, there's a reason why no other coach has had this many years in a row without a losing season, even if they won more championships or have more overall accolades and trophies and wins on their resume. It's because Tomlin is a great coach and will end up in the Hall of Fame someday, even if you don't want him there. However, the other end of his resume is he's also underachieved significantly at times. It is crazy that to have Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, and Le'Veon Bell, the triple Bs, arguably at that point, all 3 of them the best at their positions, or certainly certainly top 3 at their positions for all 3 of them, Pro Bowls, All Pros, etc., and to not make a Super Bowl at all with those 3 at their best. I mean, of course, Ben won the 2 way back and then won one when he was elite. Early on in his career, he really wasn't elite, but the second one he certainly was. In another one, losing to Green Bay. AB way at the beginning of his career when they lost to Green Bay. Bell not getting there. They did later, of course. AB won one with the Bucs. But, and we know their stories and the end of their Steeler tenures and their personal lives, but still, at that point, they were great players and getting it done, and they underachieved. And it's not like they lost all these playoff games to the Patriots in their dynasty. Again, they lost to Jacksonville when they certainly should have beat Blake Bortles and company. Let him march up and down the field on them. That was on the defense. That's on Tomlin. He makes his bones off the defense. He was the defensive coach under Dungy when they won it, or under Dungy, and then when they won a Super Bowl with the Buccaneers under John Gruden, and also a defensive coach, D coordinator with the Vikings. So Mike Tomlin has been a great defensive coach for the most part, but also has had many years where the defense has not been up to snuff, including recent years, and many seasons where his team did underachieve despite having an immense amount of talent to get it done and go further. That's true. He's overachieved and he's underachieved at times through his career. And it also happened in the middle of seasons. And that's true here in this year. You could argue he overachieved by beating Detroit and ruining their year. You could argue he overachieved by beating Baltimore on the road when they were still clicking and they were finally turning the corner. You had this controversy, but you could argue those are overachieving victories. Miami's not that great, but he ruined their year as well when they were winning games at that point. That was prime time. You could argue that win streak was obviously a positive and maybe even overachieving from what the Steelers were prior. The Steelers have had a season in which they've had this roller coaster ride. They started out with such a lead in the division. You can say what you want about what everyone else was doing, and of course the Ravens were losing, Burrow got hurt, and the Browns are the freaking Browns. But still, the Steelers had such a significant lead in the division. And then they puttered that away. And then they had a win streak and kind of got it back, and they had everything in front of them once again. You beat Cleveland, you win the division, you're in. Once you're in, you have a shot. Yeah, maybe they probably still wouldn't have won a playoff game, but Mahomes is gone, Burrow's gone, Josh Allen looks vulnerable, Herbert looks vulnerable. It's open this year in the AFC, if ever before. Depending on the matchup, maybe they get him. Maybe they get a playoff win finally. Aaron Rodgers was playing well going into the Browns game. And then Cleveland happens. And Aaron Rodgers has his worst game maybe as a Steeler. Certainly the offense could barely move the ball without DK Metcalf. And yeah, him not being there is a major ordeal and a major factor, but still, it didn't look like even if he was there, they would have done enough. Or they wouldn't have done enough to beat anybody else. Maybe they would have beat Cleveland because Cleveland didn't do much themselves. And they were even winning without TJ Watt, which is part of maybe overachieving. But then, again, you can't do it against Cleveland with everything in front of you. So Mike Tomlin does it again. Mike Tomlin's career, which is why he's so annoying to some Steeler fans, even though he's going to be a Hall of Famer someday, and he's going to be in Canton, he's going to be there, guys. He will. He's overachieved at times. He's underachieved at times. Yeah, he doesn't have a losing season, but the Steelers haven't won a playoff game since the end of the 2016 season. That's a long freaking time. It's a long freaking time for a franchise with a rich history that's used to winning playoff games. And yeah, you're not going to win a title every year in this era, really any, but it's not the 70s anymore. It won't ever be that. But it's fair to say not winning a playoff game in that many years in a row is unacceptable for a Steeler franchise, or even with the players that he did have on his team. It's also fair to say that, yeah, the quarterback play hasn't been enough prior to this year. After Ben, there was a 5-year journey of the Kenny Pickett's, the Mitch Trubisky's, the Justin Fields, Russell Wilson's, not enough, clearly, the Mason Rudolphs. Yet, other teams who also had their issues were able to get a playoff win. And yet, now it's all in front of you with a future Hall of Fame quarterback. And no, Rodgers was not even at the time of the wins playing like an MVP or playing like he did when he was in his prime. But he was giving you more than the Steelers have had in recent years at quarterback, and giving you enough to certainly beat a horrible Browns team. It's not like you had to beat a playoff team to get in the playoffs. They had to beat a really bad Browns team and they win the division. That's it. The Ravens gave it to them. The Ravens put it in front of them. And yeah, Derrick Henry gashed the Packers and they won that game, but the Ravens have put this in front of the Steelers all year by being hot and cold and being so bad at the beginning of the season, with or without Lamar Jackson. They had their issues with him. It was right there for the Steelers. And in typical Mike Tomlin fashion, they didn't grab the bull by the horns. However, as I teased here, again, mic drop with Believe, SiriusXM, Mike Asti, available everywhere you get your podcasts. And like and subscribe, of course, to my personal YouTube channel, but also find me all over social media. Is I still kind of feel like the Mike Tomlin script, as I kind of detailed briefly for his career as well, is to overachieve and underachieve at times, is to allow a roller coaster ride, both in his career and in visual seasons, to allow people to say, okay, I want to be done with Tomlin, and then turn around and be forced to eat their words in a way and have others say, no, you got to keep Tomlin forever. What are you doing? It could be a worse scenario. You could have coaches every other year and be a horrible franchise. That's been the story of this year, even while some fans and national media members, even who've defended him much longer than us here locally, and even some of his former teammates, like Ryan Clark in particular, Ben Roethlisberger, even though he doesn't want to admit it, but Ben definitely said this on his podcast and then backtracked away that they should move on from Mike Tomlin. Maybe it'd be best for him and for the Steelers. And I've detailed that on past shows. You can look it up. I've been singing this. I've been saying it for years. Any other franchise would have done it years ago, despite him being a future Hall of Famer. But as that has been the season, as that has been the story, as that has been his career, especially in recent years, with that conversation being this roller coaster ride, week in and week out on Tomlin, overachieving and underachieving at times, pumping his chest walking off the field to eliminate a team that was just in its conference championship game a season ago with a great roster still, like he did at Detroit, and then turning around and losing to a rival that barely is even a rival because they can't be competitive enough in individual seasons to make the games matter. That's the Tomlin story, but that's also why I'm pretty confident about the game in Pittsburgh Sunday Night Football against the Ravens. It's all on the line, winner take all. It will end the season. Both teams really don't deserve to be there. Both teams have coaches that maybe have worn out their welcome. Both teams have coaches that are probably going to be in Canton, but both of them have underachieved and overachieved at times, and Harbaugh and Tomlin, and both of them are tied to the hip kind of with their legacies. And John Harbaugh in Baltimore and Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. And both of them have laid eggs this year. Both of them have had issues this year. Both of them have had games that they shouldn't have lost, that they did, and why they're in this freaking situation. And they both can even point to injuries. And yet, and maybe Ravens media, Ravens fans would say, well, this is the Harbaugh story. He's going to pull this one out, even though it's on the road. And they are favored right now, which shows you what people just saw. Derrick Henry gashing Green Bay as he takes himself likely to the Hall of Fame. And I wrote about that, by the way, on Yardbarker. And the Steelers blowing an opportunity in Cleveland, as insane as that sounds. Yeah, I get maybe where the Vegas spread is. I get the win probability favoring Baltimore, even on the road, but I'm not buying it. The Tomlin story, the Tomlin script, what we've been watching for years, the movie, certainly of these last 5+, certainly this last decade, really since the early part of his career that he built the 2 Super Bowl appearances, the division titles, the championship, all those playoff wins. That's in the beginning chunk. The reason why his playoff record's below 500 and why they haven't won a playoff game in a while is because of this last decade. But in this last decade, this is the story. This is really why they're always going to keep him and always have kept him, and there will be no firing of Mike Tomlin, even if this occurs, and it'll just be up to him still. He goes on the roller coaster ride, wins, loses, wins, loses. People are loud. People calm down. People are loud. People are told to shut up. Win streak, losing streak, big win, bad loss. That's this year, in 2025. That's his whole story, really. The last decade, certainly the last handful of years. And that leads you to getting the win over Baltimore. Again, if you look at conventional wisdom, I admit, makes no sense. Derrick Henry has been gashing teams. He is playing better than he has all year. He does this every year where he kind of picks up steam. He did this last year too. Derrick Henry picks up steam in December when it gets cold and it could snow in both Baltimore and Pittsburgh. He has these 200-yard rushing performances. He certainly could do it against the Steelers' rush defense, which has not been great all year. So if you're facing Baltimore in an AFC North showdown, typical AFC North ball, as Tomlin always says, you got to be able to establish the run offensively. The Steelers have not been able to do that nearly enough this season. whether it's Warren, Gainwell, whoever, and Najee Harris not walking through that door. He's not even healthy if he did. You got to be able to control the clock. Steelers haven't been able to do that. They barely can move the ball. You got to be able to stop the run. You're facing maybe a running back that's stronger than he's ever been, as motivated as he's ever been, and maybe performing better than any back in the league, as insane as that sounds at his age, in a future Hall of Famer in Derrick Henry. And if you don't believe the Hall of Fame part, look at where he is in the all-time yards and touchdowns list. Okay? When you're top 10 in one and top 4 in the other, you're going to Canton. There are many Hall of Fame running backs that don't have rings, and who knows? But Derrick Henry is doing the old Derrick Henry thing right now, leading the Ravens even without Lamar Jackson. He did it against Green Bay, which, yeah, Micah Parsons wasn't there, but that's a playoff team. That's a good team. Certainly a better team than allow that many yards. But the Green Bay allows it, so can the Steelers. Right there, enough. Derrick Henry by himself maybe could do this. And Lamar's 50-50. Steelers have had success against him, but maybe if he doesn't play, maybe the gods want it to be more Baltimore. Who the hell knows? Either way, with or without Lamar Jackson, the Mike Tomlin script, the plan, they're going to benefit from some turnovers. Rodgers will do enough. He won't turn it over. Yeah, DK Metcalf not being there is a gigantic deal, but something will happen. A call will go against Baltimore, like in the last game. There was controversy at the end. I kind of think that was a touchdown. And the Steelers will win. That's the script. It's a roller coaster ride, and right off a real bad loss when everything could have been easy for the Steelers, they just don't want to make it easy enough. They lose to Cleveland, but they'll get this win against Baltimore. Now, to dispel some false narratives out there, too, here again, Mike Asti with Believe, available everywhere you get your podcast and on SiriusXM. Kind of a ranting edition here, one of my final shows of 2025 of the year. Had to dispel some narratives. Tomlin did it again. Go back to the Believe main page for a lot of my shows with interviews and more of that to come here in the new year. Where should I go first here? Do you want the false narrative about the sack record, or do you want the false narrative about Mike Tomlin in the Hall of Fame? I'll go sack record. There's a narrative out there, including, this is not just, oftentimes there are narratives out there that media members are told, why are you even responding to? We should all ignore. I do a national podcast with friend and colleague George Gerbo. Oftentimes he rolls his eyes when I even bring them up because he thinks, we should both be above just ignoring these. These are crazy fans, whether they're replying to me personally, which does happen a lot of the time, certainly in my personal coverage of West Virginia especially, but just in general, why go into something and even dispel something? Why waste the time if it's a crazy fan false narrative, even if it gets loud, because sometimes they get so loud, it's hard not to address. But that's not this. That's not this. This is a false narrative that is almost gaining so much steam that it's insane. And the take is insane. This is a false narrative being brought up by legitimate, respected media members in and out of Cleveland. People nationally, and I'm not talking clowns here that are just talking heads, and you know who they are, and you people watching know who I could be referring to. I'm not talking about people that just yell into a microphone, have a giant platform, and throw out hot takes on purpose. That's not even the people saying this. I'm talking about legitimate reporters. I'm talking about TV reporters who usually don't ever put their opinion out there because they're just a TV reporter or a TV anchor. That's not their role in media to have an opinion. I'm talking about veterans of the beat that have been at it for a long time that rarely ever throw a hot take. I'm talking about national media members that people actually like and respect that normally provide solid commentary. I'm obviously talking about fans, and yeah, fans are involved here, both Steeler fans and Cleveland fans. There are Steeler fans saying this. And what I'm referring to, and I'm sure you know, is that the Steelers prioritized stopping the sack record over actually trying to win the damn game. I'm all about a crazy conspiracy if I can try to argue it and it can give you some glimmer of legitimacy. I'll have some fun with a crazy conspiracy every now and then. And sometimes I'll admit I'll even believe them and I'll plant my flag, even if the mass public thinks I'm crazy. But this one I just cannot wrap my mind around. I can't meet you halfway. I can't do it. I guess I can't be the buzzsaw here. I'd love to do the heel thing, and granted, this opinion wouldn't even be the heel thing. It's almost becoming the popular opinion of people out there. Maybe outside of Pittsburgh, it is the popular opinion. But again, there are even people in Pittsburgh saying this, that the Steelers prioritize this, avoiding the sack record over trying to win. That doesn't make any damn sense. Here's why. Obviously, they didn't want to allow the sack record, and I know that Aaron Rodgers talked about it throughout the week. So that's, I think, also part of this. Obviously, they didn't want to allow the sack record for multiple reasons. They didn't want to allow somebody on the Browns to get a record. They didn't want to allow somebody to get a record against them. And they also, of course, TJ Watt is tied with Michael Strahan for the single season mark, not playing. He's been out, but they want to have their boy still have the record. I get all of that. It's very hard, also hard to believe that Myles Garrett's not going to get one more sack in the Browns' final game. Of course, he's going to try for it. He gets one more sack there. He has the record regardless. It's not like this was the final game of the season where they even could have stopped it for good. They have no say in what happens in that final game. He gets one there. He has the record. What they did the week before would be a moot point to history. Obviously, they didn't want to allow the sack. However, the game plan was the exact same as in the first matchup. And yes, he was getting sacks in the season during the first matchup at the time of that game being played. He didn't have any against the Steelers back then, by the way. That was one of his rare games without one. But who the hell would know at that point he was going to end up pursuing the single season sack record? That was early enough that it was not a guarantee by any means. The game plan of Myles Garrett from the Steelers on Sunday, when they freaking lost 13-6 and blew their chance to win the division and have to go into this winner-take-all game against the Ravens, it was the exact same as in the first game. The first game, the Steelers won. The first game, the Steelers didn't have these problems. The first game, the Steelers took care of business and were fine. And Myles Garrett's Myles Garrett. You're going to game plan for Myles Garrett, one of the greatest pass rushers in league history, certainly going today. He's going to be a Hall of Famer for sure, even if this team never wins. Look at his numbers. Look what he's doing. That's what the Hall of Fame is about, certainly for players. Joe Thomas got there as a lineman. The Browns never even got a playoff game for him. Myles Garrett's actually won a playoff game at least. So, and I'm not going to, I know he wants out. He throws those comments out there. He put himself in this situation by signing the big mega deal to stay when he could have tried to force his way out. So he's likely there for life, and it sucks for him. Oh, well. But he's a Hall of Famer. He's a game wrecker. The game plan for playing a team with him, certainly a team that's bad with him, that doesn't have much else to offer. Maybe it'd be different if he was actually on a solid team. Not the case right now. But the game plan for facing a Myles Garrett-led team, especially a bad team, is to try to take him out of the damn game, to not allow him to get sacks, not allow him to have pressure, to focus in on him. That's what they did. And in addition to that, it is for the quarterback, who it always can't be done because the Steelers have had weak quarterback play in the last several years, which is why he had more sacks in those games than, say, this year on Rodgers, is to have a quick release. And even at 42, Rodgers is not near his MVP self when he won 4 MVPs with the Packers, but he still has a quick release. And he's also playing better now than he was the last couple of years with New York. So he's still smart, too. The smarts of Rodgers has made him an upgrade from what the Steelers had in recent years as well. Just his brain, just his leadership, just his know-how. That's all been evident this year. Even in bad games, his smarts, those bad games would have been worse with the others. His smarts is there. You can tell he's a Hall of Famer with his mind. But Rodgers still has a quick release. The game plan is take Myles Garrett out of it. Don't let him wreck the game. Put 2 on him if need be. Key in on him. Know where he is at all times. And the quarterback have a quick release. That's the game plan. Same game plan as game one when the Steelers won. Game two, Rodgers is a quick release. Yeah, the offense does nothing, but he has a quick release. Yes, he didn't want to get sacked and was trying to avoid the sack, but it's not like they had a meeting before the game and said sack record number one, winning the game number two in terms of priorities. No, that's lunacy. They obviously wanted to win the game. They didn't. They sucked. Their game plan didn't work. And without DK Metcalf, which again I'll get into here in a bit, they couldn't do much on offense. Even if he doesn't get production, DK Metcalf has provided a lot of opportunities for others and has helped the offense move. They don't have really any other receiver to do that. They can't stretch the field otherwise. I get it. But the issue is that that's not their plan, and that wasn't their plan going in. They didn't sit around and say, okay, I just want to worry about the sack record and we'll go ahead and beat Baltimore in the final week. Obviously, that wasn't the game plan. That would be so malpractice. There would be utter madness for that to be the game plan. Did they want to allow a sack? Of course not. Do you have to have a quick release when you're facing Myles Garrett? Yeah. Do you want to key in on him? Yeah. Was it the same game plan of the first matchup when they won? Yes, 100%. When he wasn't going for the record then. And just looking at the counting numbers, just right there on the box score, you don't even got to watch the game and see the quick release and see the game plan. Rodgers had 39 pass attempts. He could have easily handed the ball off more. He could have easily just, turned around and gave it to somebody else. Yeah, he had a quick release because you have to against Garrett, but 39 pass attempts is not trying to just worry about a sack record. Obviously, if he hands the ball off, he can't, he's not going to get sacked, doesn't have the football. So that's crazy. And then the other false narrative that's been circulating that's now revving up the engines and has become a talking point yet again, as it always is. Anytime Mike Tomlin's job is discussed, and again, I will lead in by saying you can have two things be true. You can believe Mike Tomlin should no longer be the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, that they should move on from him, that fans and media maybe just want something new, that we're kind of sick of this same old story where we have everything pretty much right in front of us and we know what's going to happen before it occurs, that Tomlin's overachieved, underachieved, he's a Hall of Famer, but let's be done. And that there are other examples in the history of sports, certainly even in the NFL, in modern day NFL, really recent NFL, when the Philadelphia Eagles told Andy Reid, we're done with you. We're going to celebrate you later. You had a great run with us, but we're done with you. We then are going to have success. And they did. The Eagles had success after Reid winning 2 championships with 2 different head coaches. And they've had a quick release on those coaches since Andy Reid, of course. Firing Doug Peterson only a couple years after winning a championship, the first in franchise history. And then the Kansas City Chiefs embarking on a dynasty with Andy Reid and cementing himself as one of the greatest coaches of all time and on the Mount Rushmore of coaches. He wasn't there. He was a great coach, but he wasn't there on that Mount Rushmore prior to KC. The Eagles said, hey, we just need a change. It'll be great for us. It'll be great for you. And it was. It was great for us, and it was great for you, Eagles and Chiefs. That example right there is what I've argued for years the Steelers should look at. It can be done. Look at the Patriots again. They're 2 coaches removed from Belichick, and now they are a division champ already again a couple years later. After the end of Belichick wasn't great. You can do it in the NFL. It can be done. It can be done. It doesn't, not everybody does it right away, but it can be done. The Packers moved on from McCarthy. They've made playoffs since then. He made playoffs. Neither one of them won a championship, but there's been playoff appearances. It's not like they're both, he only had a couple wins and they only had 2-win seasons. He won 12 games 3 years in a row, despite being fired by Dallas, and Green Bay's had their years, but they eventually parted ways. He won them a championship. It can be done. It happens, and any other franchise would have fired Mike Tomlin by now for going this many years without a playoff win and for underachieving this often, certainly losing games like they just lost against Cleveland. That's all true. That's all true. I have to open with that because people just bring that up and just can't hear the whole thing. That's automatically their reply. Well, they should fire Tomlin. I agree. Now, we all know they're not, whenever Tomlin's no longer the Steelers coach, they're going to mutually decide to part ways. He's going to tell them, I want to go elsewhere. I want to take a break. I want to be done here. They're never going to announce it as firing Mike Tomlin. Even if they would maybe want to have that conversation, maybe they want to be done, they'd let him win the headline and it wouldn't be firing Mike Tomlin. That's not going to happen. But at the end of the day, even though the Steelers should be done for Mike Tomlin, should move on from Mike Tomlin, should have done it years ago, I totally can get and sympathize and empathize and whatever else you want to say for fans that want to just see something else and be done with Mike Tomlin. I get it. I'm on your side. I've been there for years. At the same time, he's a future Hall of Fame coach. He's going to Canton someday. He will have a bust there. People that are saying they don't get why people say he's a Hall of Famer. They don't understand how it can be a Hall of Famer. They don't think he's a Hall of Famer. You either are not informed on the history of the league. You absolutely do not know who's in that Hall of Fame. You need to do some research, or, and maybe this is the case, you're just throwing out a hot take for engagement. This happens today, of course, all the time. One of those options, because it's just a fact. Tomlin should probably not be the Steelers head coach still, and I get not wanting him anymore, but he's going to the Hall of Fame. He does have a championship. He's been to 2 Super Bowls. He has not had a losing season for forever, even though it's annoying to some fans. He has the win total that you'd want. He's been a coach a long freaking time. He also has success as an assistant. He's done a lot for his culture. You got to put that in. He's part of the multiple league committees. He's part of the competition committee. He's been a loud voice there. You could argue he's the greatest African-American coach of all time. That's important to the league. But just forget race, resume to resume. Mike Tomlin's resume lines up with Tony Dungy. He's in the Hall of Fame. Mike Tomlin's resume lines up with his predecessor, Bill Cowher. He's in the Hall of Fame. Mike Tomlin's resume lines up with several coaches in the Hall of Fame. He does. It's just the case. Look at Mike Tomlin's body of work and that overall resume, even with a below 500 in the playoffs, even with not having won a playoff game since 2016. Dick Vermeil's another one. Mike Tomlin's resume lines up with many coaches that are already in the Hall of Fame or are likely going to be in the Hall of Fame, because I think, honestly, John Harbaugh is probably getting there too. We could argue, and I don't disagree with this, that maybe they made the Hall of Fame too easy to get into for coaches and they whittled it down and watered it down. Sure, you can have a higher bar to your personal Hall of Fame, but in reality of the Pro Football Hall of Fame and the way they have set the standard, the standard is the standard. Standard is the standard for the Tomlin roller coaster ride, and the standard is the standard for the Pro Football Hall of Fame in terms of coaches. And based on that standard, when you look at who's in there and who's going to get in there, Marv Levy, another one, 4 straight Super Bowl appearances but no ring. There are coaches without championships in that Hall of Fame. Marty Schottenheimer, another one. There are coaches who have fewer wins than Mike Tomlin in that Hall of Fame. There are coaches who have fewer playoff appearances than Mike Tomlin in that Hall of Fame. There are coaches with fewer playoff wins than Mike Tomlin in that Hall of Fame. There are coaches with fewer Super Bowl appearances in that Hall of Fame. There are coaches with either equal or fewer, meaning no, Super Bowl championship than Mike Tomlin in that Hall of Fame. And there are coaches with very similar resumes in that Hall of Fame. Again, the real guiding light of why Tom was going to walk in there is Tony Dungy and Bill Cowher, his mentor and his predecessor. They are both in. It maybe took a minute. They are both in. You have them both. You got to put Tomlin in. Tomlin's going to be in. And I do feel, and maybe this is in closing here, and again, this edition of Mic Drop here, possible by Believe, and available every podcast and on SiriusXM. Kind of a Steelers ranting edition here. Steelers just, oops, Mike Tomlin does it again. The story of his season, why that'll lead to a Ravens victory nonetheless, and then, stopping some false narratives, squashing some false narratives. Go rewind the show if you need to hear those takes. But Tomlin's going to be a Hall of Famer, guys. It is very possible to argue the Steelers should have fired Mike Tomlin years ago. The Steelers should move on from Mike Tomlin. If they don't want to fire him, they should have the meeting and say, how can we part ways mutually? We just want to be done with this. That's legit. I hear you. You can say all that and also realize he's a Hall of Famer. He's going to the Hall of Fame. He deserves to be there. His resume garners it based on who already is in and who's going to eventually get there and join him. Again, Mike Asti here, Mic Drop, made possible by Believe and available everywhere you get your podcast. You can also like and subscribe my personal YouTube channel that, again, I'll be using a lot more of here in the coming year. Find me and follow me all over social media as well at Mike Asti 11. So that'll do it for this edition of the show. Again, remind you the Mic Drop page on the Believe main page. You can also search Mic Drop in any of your podcast directories, available on Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, etc. Find me on social. I'll be streaming when I do shows here. I'll have more shows with guests coming up, but maybe you'll even get me like this a time or two. More shows in general. So if need be, you'll get me like this for sure. And if something's on my mind, I got some narratives to squash like on this show, then you'll get me like this. Maybe it's best for me like this on those occasions. That'll do it for this edition of the program, though. Again, Mic Drop with Believe and available everywhere you get your podcasts. And, tune in. See, the NFL got what it wanted. They didn't rig the thing. They couldn't rig the thing. They actually don't hate the Steelers, obviously. They want the Steelers in the playoffs. They're not going to rig it against Pittsburgh. The Steelers just blew it because, Tomlin did it again. And they didn't play well, and they couldn't play well without DK Metcalf, who's a freaking big deal not to be there. But I will get this out there because I didn't do a show after his little antic with a fan. The fan is an idiot. The fan is absolutely an idiot. The fan probably should be banned, and the fan should be investigated. But DK fell for his trap. DK had to be suspended, and I don't even mind the 2 games to send a message. You can't go hit a fan because the fan acts like an idiot. That's just how it is. Sorry. I don't care what the fan said, honestly. You got to be smarter. And if that costs you the playoffs, that costs you the playoffs. And that's maybe the case right now because their offense was average with them, was becoming average with them, and it's just flat out bad without them. That'll, again, do it. That will officially drop the mic here on this Mic Drop. And more to come. More to come, to say the very, very least.